Welcome everyone to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, our name is Abitchonistim. IDSF is the leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security-oriented policies to guide the state of Israel. We are a movement of more than 20,000 people, including many reserve officers and operators from all branches of the Israel Defense establishment. Thank you, of course, to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing to allow us to really bring you behind the headlines of what is happening here in Israel. It's a great honor to be joined again today by Brigadier General Amir Avivi, the founder and chairman of IDSF. General, yesterday we really went into great detail on what's happening in Gaza. What can you share with us today about updates in this war?
Well, today we had a meaningful meeting with the Prime Minister. I can say that we basically advise regularly now on these issues. And I can say that one of the things that we see is really the determination to go in a ground incursion to Rafah. We understand that Hamas is basically left with six functioning battalions. 4 of them are in Rafah, the whole Rafah brigade. And basically taking control of Rafah will pretty much bring to an end the reign of Hamas in Gaza. It will destroy Hamas both as a military and as a governmental entity. So really a lot of discussions about these issues. I cannot go, of course, into details what was said, but I can say that when we hear this also publicly, the Prime Minister is very, very determined to achieve the goals of war and to completely eradicate Hamas. I think that what we knew before, now also the public understands more the fact that we released hostages in Rafah. Gives an understanding to the public more clear that there are hostages there. The leadership of Hamas probably escaped to Rafah, and this is why it's crucial to operate there. What would be the timetable? How it is affected by the negotiations to release the hostages? We'll see. At the moment, the head of Mossad is on his way to Egypt, is going to participate in the talks in Egypt together with the head of the CIA. But overall, Israel is coming from a position of, okay, we're coming to listen. We want to hear what Hamas has to say. But we're not waiting. We are organizing ourselves to achieve the goals of war and to deal with the last 2 battalions in the central camps and Rafah. And the army overall has approved the concept of how they want to do it. They need to present it to the government. And of course, now they're all working on the relevant timetable to do so. At the same time, we see some advancement with the French that are trying to broker some kind of deal in Lebanon. The French have a lot of leverage over Lebanon overall. And this is why, in a way, they are more effective than the US in the ability to really try and bring some kind of understanding. It seems that Hezbollah, on one hand, says we are not going to stop shooting as long as the war in Gaza continues, but they seem reluctant to really go into a full-scale war. So the French are trying to achieve an agreement that they will withdraw 10 kilometers, which is like 7 miles from the border, and cease fire once the war in Gaza ends. And it won't end without a clear victory on our side. And then in that circumstances, Israel might say to the Israeli citizens, you can go back home. So this needs to be seen whether it will work, but it seems that there is some progress in this regard. And this might postpone a war in Lebanon for at least a year. This will, of course, serve the administration in the sense of not having a big war while there are elections in the States. This is something that maybe the Iranians and the Hezbollah feel that something reasonable they can live with, and this is something that maybe the Israeli citizens will feel that also something they can kind of agree to. So I would say that these are the big dilemmas at the moment, and really the next couple of months, my expectation is to see really Hamas destroyed. And this is dependent again on really the idea of not waiting and as soon as possible when the army is ready to go into Rafah and the central camps and destroy the remaining battalions of Hamas. There is also other two considerations that are part of the process of decision making. One is that the administration is saying we have a window to do an agreement with Saudi Arabia, but this window ends in April, because after April, in the US, everybody will be busy with the elections. And also in March, there is Ramadan. So these two dates also are in consideration when the Israeli government is really thinking about the timetable of the war in Gaza. In Israel, of course, everybody following the release of the Oslo days is very excited, and people are very proud of the IDF and the Yamam and the Shin Bet that did an amazing job in this operation. A lot of people compare it to big events we had in the past in Uganda or Sabana, other operations. So I think there is a lot to look forward to in this sense. Israel is adapting at the moment to the reality that we see less munitions coming from the US. This is something that I think that Jews in the US should pressure the Congress, Senate, and the administration. They have slowed down dramatically the assistance, and this is bad. On the other hand, what it does, it makes Israel invest more and more and push harder our industries to produce more and more munitions. This is something that takes time, but I think that the way at the moment things are going, I think it makes a very clear understanding that Israel really should stand by itself, and we have to be able to conduct a war without any assistance. This requires massive capabilities in our industries to produce everything that we need, and also stockpiles that are much bigger than what we had when we started this war. So on one hand, it's a bit sad that in a war, the US is not assisting the way it could. On the other hand, it's an opportunity for Israel to really build its industries and look forward to the coming years and beyond in our ability as a Jewish people to really defend ourselves by ourselves and not depend on, at least not on these things, on anybody. So this is the main issues that are now being discussed. I think that the release of the hostages gave an understanding to most of the society that the government is dealing seriously with the hostage situation and not disregarding it. So it relieved some pressure also from the government, from the protests that were getting bigger around the demand to release hostages at any price. I think most of the Israeli society is, of course, everybody wants to release the hostages, but not at any price. And this is something that I think there is a large understanding overall in Israel. One of the very delicate things politically that are happening now is that the army is saying we need to change the law of a draft and the reserve. We need people to serve more years. We need people to serve in reserve every year, many more days than they did before, and more years. And then immediately it raises the question, okay, so what about the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredim? How come our reserve, they spend now 100 days in a war, people died, people got injured, and now they're expected to come again for many, many days and months. And there is a sense in the society that everybody needs to serve. I mean, we see that we need the whole nation really serving. And I think that there are two things here. One, before even I talk about ultra-religious, there are many, many people who served in the army who are not ultra-religious and are not doing miluim, are not in reserve and should be coming back. The IDF needs to show that it brings everybody back. So overall, people will do less days. And also, seriously, I'm hoping that the leadership of the Haredi community and the rabbis will understand that what was cannot be anymore. I mean, we really need this society that is almost 20% of the Jewish people in Israel to also serve a meaningful service. We all understand that studying Torah is hugely important. It has kept us for 2,000 years and it will keep us for many years ahead. But we need to be able to combine the studying of the Torah with a military service. We saw huge figures in our history as David the king, who wrote Tehillim, knowing how to do both, and many other Jewish leaders. So we need to find the right path to really get everybody to be part of the defense of the state of Israel. Thank you, Moshe.
General, thank you for sharing that update and touching on all those topics. We are planning on discussing next week with some of our guests this issue of the reservists' duty. So please, for all of our viewers, stay tuned next week for an elaboration on that topic. It's a great privilege to be joined right now by the head of IDSF Research, Ori Sachar, who is no stranger to these briefings. And Or has joined us today to discuss the threat on Israel's northern border. So Or, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Moshe. It's good to be here, and great words by Amir Avivi. As always, I think I'd like to first maybe refer very, very, very briefly to the hostage rescue operation. I think, as you know, you can see Amir, Yaron, myself, many members of the IDSF are quite regularly in media appearances, and both Amir and I actually have media appearances later tonight, and I think the most commonly asked question is, don't you see that no hostages come alive with military operations? Like Ori Magadish was one case where a soldier half rescued herself, was kept in an apartment, not by Hamas members, but some sort of, general members of the population. She had probably, according to reports, had access to a phone number where she called and reported what she was. But in general, hostages don't come back alive with military operations. Therefore, you need to surrender to all of Hamas demands. And I fervently rejected that. And journalists kept pushing me on this and asking, tough questions, and which I'm fine with them. But I was just quite eye-popping to see many people buy into this bluff that no hostages come alive with military pressure. The only way to bring hostages is military pressure. The previous deal was enabled thanks to military pressure, and we can see, and knowing whoever tells you that you can't rescue hostages with military operations simply doesn't know the military, doesn't know the intelligence. I can tell you that there have been numerous attempts to rescue hostages before. Some of them were successful in bringing back bodies. Some of the hostages are unfortunately dead bodies of people who were murdered on October 7th, and their bodies were taken to Gaza. And some of them were unsuccessful, unfortunately. But when we examine, for example, one of the things that strikes me the most was the very unfortunate incident of 3 Israeli hostages who were accidentally shot to death by friendly fire, as we say. Imagine if for a split of a second, the soldiers on the ground had a different decision. I think we would all be singing a different tune today. So really, I have faith in the IDF's and Shin Bet elite police force, all these units to bring back hostages home. And I think it's not always possible in a military way, but certainly it helps to change the discourse. And I think this operation will definitely alter things in Israel's favor during negotiations. Um, and well, we're all happy to see them back home. Everybody in Israel is thrilled, to be honest, really, really thrilled. Um, and then, of course, you got the losses, casualties, soldiers who fall almost daily, and that's incredibly tragic. I welcome you to visit our new website. It was launched 2 months ago. We have the IDSF website, which you know very well, and I encourage you to read there too. By the website called warinisrael.org. Moshe, if you could maybe add it to the chat.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it right now in the chat. But just this is a great opportunity to remind everyone, if you are on our news mailing list, so you get these links. So you don't have to wait for the chat to receive the link. You'll get them on a regular basis.
Please do share them with your loved ones, with your friends. It's an incredibly, I'm not saying objectively, but it's an incredibly useful platform. Really, that it streamlines all the information that you need, concentrates all the stats that you want. It's really a portal that all the stats about the war, the stories about the war, professional security analysis that you hear every day are also uploaded there, and it's updated daily. Okay, so all the information is corroborated by the IDF, and what is not necessarily an IDF data, we have collected from other sources. It's really exclusive to us, and we really encourage you to share. The more important people have access to knowledge. I can tell from watching what's going on in U.S. campuses. Sometimes ignorance is bliss, and sometimes it's dangerous. So maybe we want to have as many people as possible knowing the truth. So really here are today to speak about Hezbollah and the Northern Front. I'll just speak, let's say, very briefly for 5 minutes, and then we'll open up to questions because I'm eager to know, to learn what you have to say and what you have to ask. So basically, as you all know, I think the correct way to frame the current war is not an Israel-Hamas conflict. It's actually the first Israel-Iran war. It's the first Israel-Iran war. We are fighting right now in at least 7 fronts, if not 8. We got, of course, in varying levels of intensity. So we've got, of course, the Gaza war. We got the Northern Front, which we're going to talk about today, but also what you know very well from the attacks on U.S. bases. So we got Syria and Iraq. We got the Houthis in Yemen, Judea and Samaria, and tensions among Israeli Arabs. We are very glad to see that Israeli Arabs, I think, understand the gravity of the hour. We see some in the Arab sector, Bedouins join the military, but basically the vigilance is maintained there. The tensions around Jerusalem, all these things are much more moderate today, also because of the great work done by the IDF and the Israeli police. So what does Nasrallah want? What is Hezbollah up to? What is Iran up to? And I really think the most important question here, we hear negotiations about pushing Hezbollah from the border. I think the most important question is not what Israel should do, but rather what Iran should do. Whenever I hear European officials, even some in the US administration, say that Israel should avoid escalation in the northern border, well, I'm asking myself, what is really the choice? What choice does Israel have? It can avoid war by temporarily by paying Hezbollah basically bribe, like we did in the previous gas agreement, giving up Israeli territory. And maybe we can assure quiet in relative terms for several weeks or months. This is not how you run foreign policy. This is not how you write security strategy. Several principles to keep in mind, because we know, just a short background, that there are negotiations in place. France is weighing in order to really push Hezbollah 10 kilometers from the border, replace them with Lebanese military forces. Amos Hochstein, the U.S. mediator, is involved. And basically, Israel's goal right now is to see what Hezbollah is up to next. And really, the question before us is, let's speak in three principles that we need to address this issue. One is, what do Iran and Hezbollah want? Okay, because this is critical to understand what Israel can do next. Iran has an interest to warm up the northern border, and I think in that sense, we see the Iranian foreign minister visiting Beirut last week, meeting Nasrallah, Secretary General of Hezbollah, and discussing the matters. He's visited Beirut several times over the past few months since October 7, and we know Iran has approximately 70% of Hezbollah's $1 billion budget covered, so about right around $700 million of budget. And Iran has really an interest to keep Israel busy on the northern front as well. Number two is, what will Israel do in case of an attack? That's easy. Israel, like what's really the spectrum of choices that Israel has in front of it. So if in case Hezbollah really attacks full-fledged, then yeah, that's easy. We'll go to war with Lebanon. But if it doesn't, I think Israel will really need to put a red line and say, all right, that's the deadline. That from that point on, we need to bring people back to their homes in the north. Over almost 100,000 evacuees, really displaced people in their own country. I haven't seen the United Nations have an emergency meeting on that, only about displaced Palestinians and Lebanese. We have a UN report about displaced Lebanese, and it was quite amusing to me because it never mentioned Israeli displaced people in their own country. That really shows the lack of credibility of the international community. And really, the third point is, well, what will the world do? What will the world do? What will the international community do? What will the United States do? And I think in that regard, we really need to see more pressure by the Biden administration, not only on Lebanon, but also on Iran. Iran is really the fuel in the Hezbollah car. If Iran doesn't exist, Hezbollah doesn't exist. It runs out of budget. It runs out of funds, and the next thing you know, there is civil uprising in Lebanon against Hezbollah, which represents a tiny sliver of Lebanese population. So really, this is really where our cards are laid on the table. Which side blinks first, and what we need. Really, Israel has an interest not to go to war with Lebanon right now, but it really depends what the other side does. And this whole situation can be resolved tomorrow, even right now. Iran can decide that he doesn't want Hezbollah to attack Israel. Period. End of story. And we're back to where we were a year ago. And I think it's only when the Gaza front will end, or at least the high intensity stage will end. I think this is the only point where we can actually see a real change in the Lebanese front. And let's open it up to questions, really.
Or I'll ask you, in terms of that red line with Hezbollah, to what extent, Hezbollah has been a threat on the northern border for many, many years. To what extent is that red line informed by the living conditions in Israel, the ability for 100,000 people to return home, versus the military threat from Hezbollah and Iran? Is one factor greater than the other in terms of compelling the government to take action? Israel living conditions versus military threat?
Well, I think with no pressure on the part of the residents, the Israeli government would not act so fast. And so I think pressure should be made by bottom up as well, by people who are living in the north and would not tolerate living in hostile rooms any longer. But also, you got the Iran Hezbollah threat that is real. The Israeli government has no interest to pay so much to hotels and hostels to keep people out of their homes. And the question is, what do we do when the threat becomes a reality? And the question is, I think in that sense, Israel should really set a deadline for that red line. In that sense, I don't think we can have a magic wand and somehow make Hezbollah disappear. Next thing you know, there are on the border again. I think we have to boost the northern defense with at least 2 more divisions of reservists to switch forces so they may make the people who were there until now to go home to refresh. And to boost local rapid response squads. They've proven invaluable. Those who were functional, they've really proven invaluable on October 7 in the south. They really need to have community-based defenses, and really do the utmost to push Hezbollah away from the border, make sure it's pushed away, and boost border defense, and get ready for the next war. It will come one day, but I don't think we have an interest to see it right now.
Many of our viewers are expressing in the chat now, and have done so for many weeks in emails to me, that they think that there is some push, whether international or within Israel, to cede territory in the north of Israel, either formally cede or just by default, by not having Jews inhabit that area anymore. Do you think this is part of the equation? Do you think there is this ulterior motive by whoever to make the north uninhabitable?
Not in Israel, but of course on Hezbollah side. And I think it really is amusing. I think some people that I hear in international media, even in international forums, believe that Hezbollah is some sort of a honest negotiator where you can seriously take them for the word, ask them what are your demands, meet halfway, and everybody goes home happy, win-win situation. And it's not how it works with terror organizations. Once we understand that Hezbollah's goal, Hezbollah's raison d'etre, Hezbollah's really motor that keeps them running is the struggle, only then we realize how we can deal with Hezbollah. We cannot take away from Hezbollah the element of struggle, otherwise there will be no Hezbollah. So we gave them, I don't know how much this in miles, more than 1,000, but 800 and I guess 848 square kilometers of sea territory. Let's say it's around 1,500 miles, square miles. And plus 400 square kilometers on top of that, which will be banned for Israeli drilling. That did not stop Hezbollah because they demand the Sheba farms and the 11 villages and the Rajar village, and every time they'll have an excuse until they reach Jerusalem. And until they reach Jerusalem and occupy the entire quote-unquote historic Palestine, occupy the entire state of Israel, they would not rest. So territorial concessions is not the answer for Hezbollah. They would just grow their appetite. We need to have deterrence, military superiority, and pressure by the international community.
Or we are completely out of time, but I want to ask you a very important question on a completely different topic. We have 30 seconds for an answer. I know that you spend a lot of time lecturing to the young generation here in Israel, college-age students. 30 seconds. What is the state of Zionism right now and the Jewish spirit amongst this generation?
In one word, fabulous. Really. I mean, I got to tell you, somebody told me just recently, and I love it. We kind of undermine the younger generation and their willingness to fight. We call them Gen Z, and the Gen Zers actually prove themselves as really Gen Z, Generation Zionism. So really, what I love about it is that I just spoke yesterday with a group. They really are inspiring. They just come to me after the lecture with such, glittering eyes, with a spark in their eyes, and they ask me how can I help them to actually recruit to an even more combat and better unit than what they were supposed to go, because it's their dream to be in, combat intelligence and all these things. So really, the demand is very high, the motivation is very high, and it's just, amazing to watch, and it's so inspiring. Rest assured, the generation, like good wine, only gets better over time.
Very glad to hear, and it's great to end off our briefing on that positive note. Ori Yisachar, thank you so much for joining. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning in. We will be back with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Until then, stay safe, stay strong, take care.